time to relax. And so, one thing that I want to talk about real briefly before we dive into this is
Hmm.
if you missed our main episode this month, episode 30, you definitely want to go back and check that out because we talk about a lot of fun and interesting things there, not the least of which being what the future of this particular show might hold. So be sure to check that out if you haven't already. But in the interest of getting things rolling here, I did want to mention and talk a little bit about my most recent book read, which was See You Later by Daniel Lorn. And this was actually my first read by him, which intrigued me right away as soon as I heard about the premise of this book, because it's about sleep paralysis, which I think makes a very excellent foundational element for a horror novel. Are you familiar with the sort of phenomenon of sleep paralysis?
Yeah, not in depth, but yes.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that's quite the hook, right? Because it's like that's I think for people who have experienced anything like that or people who are familiar with the concept, that's a pretty terrifying thing to experience, especially if you've never experienced it before. And what Daniel did with this book was to actually use that as a foundational element and then wrap some supernatural stuff around that in a way that I thought was very cool and very clever. I don't want to go too much into the details of the book because it is a kind of short piece, kind of leaning in that short novella, long novelette kind of range. But there's definitely some cool moments in it, some cool like little scenes that he sets up involving the sleep paralysis stuff. And also another thing that I wanted to shout out about that book, which I thought was very noteworthy, is a lot of his descriptions of people and places, like his world building, for lack of a better term, in that book. I think is pretty spot on. It really kind of stood out to me. His way of putting you in a place, right? Right, like making you feel like you're in the park where this incident happens. That's sort of the catalyst for what happens in the book, or you're in the drug den that the characters go to at one point because of something that they're doing that's relevant to the plot. Um, so just little details like that, little sort of literary flourishes that he injects throughout that story, I think are very nice and very cool. It's definitely, I think, a really good fit for me personally in terms of the subject matter, in terms of the concept and the sort of unique wrinkles that that story has. So it's definitely a good starting point, I think, for me in terms of exploring his work. And definitely wanted to give it a little shout out here for sure. I know you read his book Obsession recently because we talked about that on the show. Have
Yeah,
you read any of his other
good.
stuff since then?
No, I have read, not as in I have read
Yes,
ABC
yes. There's
book,
another
the
book
book is
called
like,
Red.
just in
Yes.
case anyone was confused there.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah.
But I have
Good
not
clarification. Yeah.
gotten to that, as
Yeah.
I'm sure, well, everyone's aware. In the same boat, we all have huge TBRs
Yes.
and trying to get my way through them. Yeah,
Yeah,
he
that's always the struggle, right? Because that was the thing with him is I knew I wanted to read something from him, but I was having trouble deciding what I wanted to read. But then I came across that See You Later book, and when I read the synopsis for it and kind of got the hook of what it was about, I kind of realized, oh wait, this is probably going to be the best fit for me personally.
yeah,
So I'm glad I started with that one for sure.
yeah. No, he's a really good author. It's funny, because you just you wonder how many really good authors are out there that just you don't know about,
Hmm.
don't have the time to check them out, or you just didn't have the ability. It just the name never crosses your path.
Yeah. Well,
And
and that's why I think we have to all spend so much time as authors putting ourselves out there, right?
yeah,
Because if you don't set those hooks, right, or cast those nets, you're just never going to get the attention, right? You because sometimes people have to see your stuff. You know, they used to say it was like the rule of threes in advertising, right? Where you have to see something three times before you act on it. I think it's more like the rule of 30 these days,
yeah,
where it's like you really got to see something quite a bit before it really
yeah,
sinks in, just because there's so much stuff out there competing for people's attention these days.
exactly.
Um, so
But yeah, check him
yeah,
out.
it
He
is
writes
funny
really
though.
well.
What's that?
I was just saying that everyone should check him out because he's a really good author.
Oh yeah,
He
for
writes really
sure.
well.
Yeah. Yeah, I was just gonna say, it's funny how long somebody can sit on your TBR despite your best intentions, was all I was gonna say, right? Like, is it like there's
Yeah,
so many people that I know, like I want to read something from them, but it's just a question of like finding the time or the opportunity to get around to it. So
yeah,
I definitely, I definitely like to, especially these days, go out of my way to try to pick people that I haven't read something from before. Um, but I find myself oftentimes lately being pulled back to people who I am already familiar with because if you already know you like their style, then it's sort of
yeah,
like a comforting experience. So it's just a question of like, do I feel adventurous or do I feel like I want to be comforted today? And
yeah,
that's like the coin I have to flip before I decide which part of the TBR I pull from.
yeah. My biggest problem is I love reading, but I also have a passion for movies,
Mm-hmm.
and I sometimes I go, I should just give up movies and just spend, I could get through so many more books, but I had retired, but then got pulled back in
Just when you thought he
because
was out.
apparently no one wants to work anymore and it's finding hard to find people, especially in certain positions that are more skilled, I guess. So, you know, it was a very brief retirement that I had. I even made an announcement and everything.
Yeah, I remember that.
Then
Yeah.
within 6 months, I was back working, but
Mm-hmm.
whatever. But it was like you, I went back, I do it part time.
Mm-hmm.
But, the thing is in this day and age, money's king. Everything's so expensive and just crazy to try to keep up. So when you got money coming in, it's really hard to pass it up.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah,
Well, and I think, to your point about movies versus books, I think one advantage that movies will always have is they're very easy to consume, right? Because you can
yeah,
literally just plop yourself down on the couch and be like, feed my brain movie.
exactly. Well, that's what it is. When I went back to work, it was just like I get home some days and I'm drained.
Hmm.
And I know that when I go up to bed, I'm gonna read because I always read before bed.
Hmm.
So I can read in the evening, like, oh, I'm gonna watch whatever. And there's just such a plethora of interesting things on
Yeah.
streaming services and what have you. That that's sort of my unwind,
Hmm.
you know. Or you want to
Yeah.
listen to music. There's just too many things to do. Music,
Yeah.
video games, like our show, what we talked about. It's
Yeah.
hard to fit everything in.
Yeah. No, it's true. I mean, you do have to be kind of selective. Well, and I think like that's one good thing about us presenting things to people, right? Is maybe that helps them a little bit to decide, what might be worth spending their time on, right?
Yeah,
Just a little bit of curation never hurt.
that's it.
Um, but speaking of watching stuff, speaking of movies and TV shows and stuff, you watched something recently that I know you wanted to talk about here.
Yes. And as a matter of fact, I wrote notes
Ooh.
because I was trying to keep all my thoughts in my head about the movie because it really is sort of multi-layered.
Hmm.
And I couldn't quite spit it out when I was trying to think of how to discuss it, but I found I was able to sort of write it out, the
There you
point
go.
forms kind of thing. So the
Lay it on me.
movie I watched was His House, which is on Netflix, and I
Okay.
really enjoyed it. And when I first got it or first saw it, I was kind of on the sort of the fence, and I was like, not in the mood for that. And then one day my wife saw me looking at it and said, "Oh, I might be interested in watching it." So that doesn't happen very often. So that
Got
pushed
to
it right
strike
up
while
to
the
the
iron's
queue.
hot. Yeah.
That's it. So we watched it. Um, it's about a refugee couple who escape from the war-torn Sudan and arrive on England shores. As I'd mentioned, it's like a multi-layered film, which surprised me, which is probably why I enjoyed it because, as we talked about actually in Postmortem Report, it was different, and you know how much I like different kind of things.
Hmm.
So this had a whole kind of interesting. This is going to be a different kind of vibe. So I was sort of into it. So they escape the Sudan, arrive in England. We experience the struggle they have climatizing to their new home and the loss of their daughter to the angry seas along their journey. From their early days in a refugee camp until they're provided with a modest place of their own to start their new lives. Um, there's the neighbors are a bit frosty towards them, because they're newcomers and what have you.
Hmm.
Um, but from a bleak to modest start, at least they think that they're finally safe.
Hmm.
But not so fast.
I was gonna say
This
that
is a
sounds like a
horror
setup.
movie. Yeah. So just as they're settling in, they begin to hear these They start to see braziers everywhere. It's horrifying. They start to hear bizarre sounds and then visions of creepy beings um, just sort of appearing. And they actually chase them, and they seem to just disappear into these holes in the wall.
Oh my.
So you're like, are they living in the walls? Are they like, is there anything in there? And the husband starts like bashing holes in the wall trying to find what's there. And
Mm-hmm.
it's you start wondering, is it in this guy's head, or is
Mm-hmm.
this actually like really happening? The way the filmmaker blended the awkward way the couple try to assimilate into their new society. There's one part where they're eating with utensils instead of their hands,
Hmm.
and the wife's like, you know, putting in her mouth. She goes,
Struggling.
The food tastes like metal."
Yeah.
So, which is funny because it's nothing that I would ever have thought, because I
Yeah.
would have thought, well, look, you're eating with your hands where you came from, look, utensils, civilization. But
Hmm.
I was like, well, yeah, it's natural how whatever their food stuff is, they ate it, was natural. But she was like, ugh, the food all tastes like metal.
Yeah.
And it really struck me as something I
Uh-huh.
would never have thought of in my own experience. Um, and even the changing ways they would usually dress. Um, the husband more so than the wife, where the husband seems to desperately want to fit in. He goes to a
Hmm.
local pub and starts singing like a soccer chant along with the people, and they all kind
Hmm.
of turn and look at him, and the whole place goes like silent. But he's trying to dress as
Yeah. Trying
an
to
English
assimilate.
person
Yeah.
would,
Yeah.
and the wife doesn't. The wife kind of keeps her own kind of things. So dealing with the culture clash, the assimilation, and the constant horrifying phenomena that surrounds them in their new home, uh, the different layers. it makes it sort of unsettling.
Hmm. Yeah, there's a
Um,
lot of balls in the air there, it sounds like.
yeah.
Yeah.
And so
Yeah.
you're following and so when something happens, you're just like you're into the whole, oh, well, that didn't work out well at the pub, and you're sort of in that mindset. And then he's walking the house, and all of a sudden this screaming crazy thing comes flying by. It just it takes you right out of how you were
Yeah.
feeling, and I thought that
Sure.
was very clever. But as the culture clash and the horrors surrounding them all come to a head, so a few unexpected things are revealed.
Uh, I'm assuming we don't want to
But
reveal what
that's
those
enough said.
unexpected things are. Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah. Yeah.
I don't want to, ruin the movie for you or anyone who's watching.
Yeah.
Uh, you
Yeah. Yeah.
know,
No,
Go check
that
it out for
sort of defeat
yourself.
the
But
purpose for sure. Yeah.
yeah, I was because I was really curious the way it was going. I was like, how are they going to wrap this up, and where is it going? What's going to happen? And of course, I had all my own ideas
Sure.
of
Yeah.
kind of what was happening, and
Uh-huh.
some pretty close. But it's one thing happens where I was like, and I kicked myself because I don't know why I didn't see that coming.
Yeah. Yeah.
But but yeah,
That's funny
it's
how that works sometimes. And I feel like it's always a testament to the filmmaker, right? When they can almost divert your thinking to the point where like you don't catch something that should have been obvious because they distracted you with something else.
yeah.
Yeah.
So yeah, it was really well done. The acting was really good. Um, um, uh, it was like talking about the books. I just it was sitting on my TBW
Yeah. Yeah.
before too long, and then something kicked it to the top, and it's like, wow, I wish I had seen it, but it was a perfect timing, and I guess I was in the mood for that type of a movie too, because my wife was willing to watch actually a horror movie, which
Yeah.
is far and in
Yeah. I mean,
between.
you gotta capitalize on those opportunities for sure.
That's it.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's really good. It's funny. I looked at it afterwards because I want to see how the reviews are, and do you know it got like 100% on Rotten Tomatoes?
Oh, nice.
I never even heard of 100% given to anybody.
Yeah, there's been a few of them, but not too many. Yeah.
Yeah, but I was like, oh my. So yes, if you don't trust me, you can trust Rotten
Trust
Tomatoes
the
and their
tomato meter,
the
apparently.
tomato meter and
Yeah.
their plethora of reviewers.
Yeah.
But yeah, it was a fun watch.
So that's a question. Do you think that would be a good read? Do you think that could work as a book, that
It probably
story?
would actually.
Yeah.
It
Yeah.
probably would, but visually, it makes it more
Yeah, more
chaotic. It
punch.
depends on you as a reader. If you're like for authors, I find when I'm talking to other writers, we can visualize things
Hmm.
better.
Yeah.
So, because it's how we write. But um, when he's like, it kind of it's like an example be kind of like when in The Shining
Hmm.
when he starts going through the door.
Uh-huh.
It's like a simple thing, but it's kind of iconic because it's just
Sure.
like the idea of, I think, breaking your own house or somewhere that you're living
Right.
is disconcerting.
Sure.
So when
Yeah.
they're, tearing stuff down, it's a different layer to it.
Yeah.
So I think it may play better as a movie because it's kind of visually. I don't know if you're like I can't actually remember now when I read The Shining. Does he put the axe through the door in the book?
You know what? It's been so long since I
I
read it.
know.
I honestly can't remember because I
Yeah.
probably haven't read that book in a good like 20, 25 years.
Yeah.
So
But I don't think it would have the same impact as when Jack shoves that head through the door,
yeah, yeah, yeah.
because some things are just visually more stimulating,
Sure. Yeah.
leaves an impact.
Well, that's what I would wonder. Is it like, would it be more of a slow burn reading it as a book? And maybe would there be like more would you would you draw that story out more as a book, and maybe the pacing of it might be different because it's a film. But anyway,
Yeah,
that's a theoretical exercise. Sorry,
there you
took us
go.
off the rails there.
Yeah,
Uh, but yeah, man, that sounds cool. I'll have to check that out when I subscribe to Netflix for that Tyson fight.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. It'll be interesting. I'm really, really curious how it's going to play out. But it
Mhm.
starts at 8, and you figure there's like, I think at least going to be like 4 bouts
Mhm.
before his fight because they're going to
Yeah.
make obviously the main event.
And if you
So
don't know
I don't
what we're
know.
talking
It could be
about,
11 o'clock or
yeah.
something before he even goes on.
If you don't know what we're talking about, we happen to be recording this episode on the day of the Mike Tyson Logan Paul fight that's apparently going to be on Netflix. So that was one of
It'll be
Ron's
over.
topics. Yeah, that was one of Ron's
Uh,
topics in episode 30 of the show. So we're bringing that one back here to wrap things up.
yeah. So it'll be interesting. So
But
yabba dabba doo.
indeedly doodly, eedly oodly. Well, I think it's probably time for us to get up on out of here. We will see you all for episode 31 of the old postmortem report. Will be the next thing you'll see on your feed. I did want to mention moving forward, we may actually not be doing off the clock every month. So just so you know, we're only going to be doing these if we feel like we have something extra that we want to talk about that doesn't actually fit into the main show moving forward. So some months you might get an off the clock, some months you might not. If you have feelings about that, be sure to share them in the comments because we could use more comments. And we will see you all next time.
Goodbye. Happy New Year.